Hello, my name is Emma, and today I am going to be sharing the books that I read in the month of July. I had a really good reading month in July. I completed 8 books and 1 novella. I actually DNF'd 2 books this month, which is not something I frequently do, but I asked you guys on Twitter if you wanted me to talk a little bit about them in my wrap-up, so I will be doing that today. This is also partially a biannual Bibliothon wrap-up, as that readathon did happen this July and I participated. If you would like to check out my reading vlogs from that week, I will leave them linked below, but without further ado, let's talk about some books. So the first book I read in the month of July is Undead Girl Gang by Lily Anderson. I actually read this as it is a part of the Biblio Book Club, which is a book club I host with some of my very best friends. We will be having a live show discussion for it very soon, so follow us on Twitter at @BBibliothon if you want to find out when that is. Undead Girl Gang follows a plus-size Mexican girl named Mila, who is a Wiccan, and after her best friend has been found dead and the town has ruled it as a suicide, she is confident that her friend would never have been involved in something like that without her knowing, so she sets out to bring her back to life. But unfortunately, along with that, she brings back 2 other popular girls who have also recently died by suicide, and they basically have to team up and find out who it is that killed them and why. I really enjoyed Undead Girl Gang. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Overall, it was a really fun, entertaining story. I really liked the narration. It was very funny. Mila as a narrator was the perfect fit for this story, because while there is like a lot of like deep dark stuff going on and they're like messing with the balance of nature and stuff, she's also really funny, so that was a great sort of comic relief for the story. Truthfully, I didn't really care for many of the characters other than Mila and Riley. I feel like June and Dayton had like a little bit of layers, but overall they were just like very stereotypical and they didn't add much to the story. I think a lot of people went into the story expecting it to be like a hard classic urban fantasy novel with lots of magic and spells, but that's really not the story. It's very much a mystery sort of thriller with these Wiccan elements in between, and it's very modern. It's not very magical, but it was overall a nice combination of both of those things. I just had a lot of fun with this story. It was really enjoyable. I wasn't super shocked by the twist at the ending. It wasn't like the most impressive conclusion, but overall it was a really fun, enjoyable story, and if you're looking for more paranormal YA, I would definitely put it on your list. The next book that I read in the month of July is City of Lost Souls by Cassandra Clare. This is book 5 in the Mortal Instruments series and my favorite book of all time. I read this as a part of the year-long read-along for the Shadowhunter Chronicles that I am hosting. We do live shows for every book in the Shadowhunter Chronicles. We have a Facebook page where you guys can discuss it all day long, so I will leave some of that information down below if you're interested. I read City of Lost Souls for what is the 9th time, and I loved it as much as I've loved it every single time. This book really has like held up against all the rereads for me as my absolute favorite book. You know, people ask me all the time, why is City of Lost Souls your favorite? And it's really hard for me to describe. There are just certain points in the story where I am just like filled with this overwhelming love of this story, and I don't know why I connect so greatly with it, but I do. It's especially hard for me to go into without spoilers, but I just feel it's a really complex book. There are a lot of thought-provoking situations the characters are placed in, and I just think it's a thrilling installment of this story. I think it is just really interesting and unique, and just it's so good. I love it so much. So to quickly talk about the first book I DNF'd in the month of July, it is The Thousandth Floor by Katherine McGee. This is a futuristic novel that takes place in this gigantic skyscraper in New York City that has 1,000 floors, and the higher you are to the top of the skyscraper, you are more wealthy. That's all I really know about it. I only got 12% in because I was borrowing it through my local library on ebook, and my library loan expired before I could get further. So that's the main reason I DNF'd it. I just didn't want to go through the hassle of redoing it when I have so many other books that I'm planning on reading. But additionally, I wasn't loving it that much. I felt that the writing was really immature and below the standards of what I like to read about in YA. There were so many perspectives. There's like 5 main characters who all have their own individual points of views. I don't even think I got to meet all the characters because there were so many of them. And there was just something about the character dynamics that set me off. Like, here's my thing about YA books. Anytime an author refers to sex as doing it, it's my kryptonite. I'm done. Like, I immediately have an issue with the story. story, if that just like gives you an idea of what the writing's like of this story. So it really wasn't a favorite of mine. I don't have the motivation to continue it right now. I would love to finish it in the future because I feel like this could be like a really great trashy YA novel for me that I just read for the entertainment, that has a ton of flaws, but I love it anyways. But I'm just not up for putting myself through that at the moment. I didn't love what I did read of it, so maybe I'll continue it in the future, but I'm not sure. Moving on to my biannual Bibliothon wrap-up, the first book I finished that week is City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab. I picked this up to complete the challenge for read the first chapter of 3 books and pick one you want to continue with, and City of Ghosts follows a girl named Cass who has the ability to interact with ghosts and enter the spirit world. So when her parents move across the ocean to Scotland to host a TV show on the world's most haunted places, she ends up meeting another person who has the same abilities as her, and so she begins to learn a lot about this power she has, what it means, and how dangerous it is. I really enjoyed City of Ghosts. I also gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I've been in such a middle grade mood lately. I feel like I say that in every single video, but that's why City of Ghosts was just such a great pick for me. I wanted paranormal and I wanted middle grade, and it was a perfect amalgamation of both. My thing with middle grade right now though is I don't know how to review it. Like, I've read hundreds of young adult books, but middle grade is very new for me, so I'm not in tune with what I like in middle grade, what I don't like, what I think is good writing or bad writing. So it's really bizarre for me to be able to talk about it because I don't know what anything I'm talking about means. I will say I found the plot of this story interesting, fun. My one main critique of City of Ghosts is that I felt it was quite simplistic. You know, the plot was very straightforward, like one plot running throughout the entire story. I felt the characters had like their characteristics and their personalities, but they didn't have a lot of layers or development to them. And again, my issue arises where I'm like, is this just what middle grade paranormal stories look like, or is this specific to this one book and that's a weakness of it? So I'm not really sure. That's just how I felt about this particular book, but I really enjoyed it. It comes out in August, and if you are a paranormal lover like myself, I definitely think it's worth the read, and I'm super excited for book 2. The next book I completed during the biannual Bibliothon is Heretics Anonymous by Katie Henry. I'm sure you are all sick of me talking about this book already. I read this book for the challenge of read a predicted 5-star read, and I'm sure as many of you can guess via my social media posts and my recent review of Heretics Anonymous, it was a 5-star read. I'll leave that spoiler-free review down below if you want to check it out, but Heretics Anonymous follows an atheist named Michael who enters Catholic school for the very first time and finds himself in this underground secret society called Heretics Anonymous. And with Michael being the newest addition to the group, he challenges the other heretics to go out anonymously into the school, go public, and start exposing their hypocrisies. I'm sure you can assume, like, I don't think it's possible for you to have been on my channel in the last 2 weeks and have not heard me talk about this, but I loved Heretics Anonymous so much. It's definitely one of my favorites of the year and went above and beyond all of the already really high expectations I had for it. It's so funny. I don't even know how to start explaining to you guys how hysterical this book is, but if you like need a good laugh, Heretics Anonymous is one you absolutely need to pick up. I really love the cast of characters in this story. They all just complement each other so well despite being so different. It's just a really wonderful, healthy friendship dynamic, and like I feel like I'm just like repeating everything I said in this review, but it's so great. It offers a really interesting perspective on religion and faith, which are sort of like taboo topics in YA, and it approaches them in this humorous way but also with this message of tolerance and acceptance of other people's different beliefs, and it was just all around amazing. I'm trying to condense my thoughts on it really quickly because I've been talking about it so much, but it's fantastic. It also comes out August 8th, and I would definitely recommend you pick it up. The next book I read for the biannual Bibliothon is The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw, and this was the group book for this past readathon. The Wicked Deep follows a girl named Penny who lives in a town where these witches return every summer to take the lives of 3 boys as a part of revenge, and so when this outsider turns up in town, Penny makes it her mission to protect him. I was really hyped for this book. Like, so many people were loving it and describing it as this like amazing paranormal story, and I unfortunately did not love it. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars, which is like very, very low for me. It just wasn't a great reading experience. I feel like the best way to describe it is I have the arc of this book. I'm not putting my money towards the final copy because I just don't care for it. The thing I loved about this book is it has one really, really strong element, and that is the atmosphere. It is just so vivid. This town feels so real. The town itself and the history is constructed so well, and it's just such a shame that everything else about this book was a letdown for me. I felt like this book was going in circles. I listened to the audiobook, which, like, hey, could always impact my enjoyment of the story, I acknowledge that. But I feel like every single time I turned on the audiobook, we were having the same conversation. Why is Beau actually here? What is his motivation? Are these girls, these specific girls, the witches? Is it somebody else? Are they actually witches, or is it some sort of cult, or is it something rational? And I just felt like we were always having the same conversation and nothing else happened. There's a big twist in this story, and a lot of people said they predicted it. A lot of people were shocked by it, and that's why they loved it. I didn't expect it, but when I came up to it, I was like, oh, that's clever, like, cool. It like didn't change my enjoyment of the story whatsoever, and it definitely should have. And also within this story, we have a few moments in the past where it's like a flashback to when these 3 witches were alive and when they were just normal girls. And honestly, I enjoyed that so much more than the present story of Penny and Beau. Like, I want a story about the Swan sisters. I would totally read a YA novel about them, and especially by this author and in this atmosphere. But just like Penny and Beau's story was so boring to me, and I couldn't get behind it, and I think that's like a real fail on the author's part to make me more interested in the flashbacks than the actual active story. So in my opinion, The Wicked Deep wasn't great. I wouldn't recommend it. I'm sort of just like putting it in the back of my mind. Like, I read it, I didn't enjoy it. Let me move on forward with more books that I could actually enjoy. I really wanted to love it, but I just didn't. The next book that I read for the Biennial Bibliothon is Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan, and this completed the challenge for Read the Last Book That You Bought, as well as read an Own Voices novel, as the author is Singaporean and it follows other characters from Singapore. Crazy Rich Asians follows a girl named Rachel who is going to spend the summer in Singapore with her boyfriend named Nick, but Nick failed to tell Rachel that he comes from one of the most wealthy and prestigious families in all of Singapore, and so it just follows all of the crazy drama and shenanigans that happen while Rachel is in Singapore. I really loved Crazy Rich Asians. I gave it, I think, 4.5 out of 5 stars because it was just such a fun, entertaining story. What I wanted from the Thousandth Floor is what I got with Crazy Rich Asians. It was fun, it was drama filled, it was shocking and extravagant and glamorous, and it was just so great. My one gripe with Crazy Rich Asians was a lot of the writing and construction of the story. The writing just like wasn't the best. I felt like the syntax was pretty weak and whatnot. There are also so many characters and even more perspectives. Like, I could not keep track of it all. There is a family tree in the very beginning that explains how all of the different family members are related on Nick's side, but like, man, it took me a while and it still didn't stick very close to the end. I like only just got it. Another thing with the writing and the perspectives is it does this really bizarre thing where it switches into the heads of different characters and goes to their point of view without warning. But for example, if you're reading a chapter from Astrid and you would be reading a conversation between her and Rachel, you would start in Astrid's head and you would get her thoughts and reactions to what Rachel is saying, but then like out of nowhere you would just be in Rachel's head and you would know what she was thinking, and then it would go back to Astrid, and it was just very confusing and like not a great choice in my opinion. It was odd, but everything about the plot was just, it was just fun. That's all I can say about it. It was just really, really fun and entertaining. Listen, I get this is the plot of the story, but I did not like how Nick just did not prepare Rachel at all for meeting his family. Like, he didn't even tell her that he had money, and then she's just thrown into all of this classism and stuff she doesn't deserve because Nick didn't prepare her. And I like that it was brought up and challenged in the end, but that was like a really frustrating part of the plot for me. Everything else was fun. It was really gripping and I just like could not stop reading. I initially went into the story thinking I could just read book 1 and I'd see the movie and then I would enjoy myself with what I I read of it and I didn't feel originally compelled to finish it, but I bought the whole series and now I definitely want to continue. It's just a really, really fun story and I can't wait to continue. The last book that I finished for the biannual bibliothon is Labyrinth Lost by Zoraida Cordova, and I read this to complete a book that has been on my TBR for over a year, as well as pick a book off of somebody else's TBR. Labyrinth Lost follows a bruja named Alex who does not like magic. So on her death day celebration, where she's going to really come into her powers, she tries a spell that would take them all away, but unfortunately it ends up that she makes her family disappear, and so she has to travel into this sort of lost world in order to find them. I ended up giving Labyrinth Lost 3.5 out of 5 stars. There were things that I really did like about it, but the rest of it was just kind of lackluster for me and I just didn't love it as much as I wanted to. I think Alex is a very likable main character. I think she has nice traits, but overall the cast of characters is just not one I feel is going to stick with me for a very long time. I just don't feel as strong a connection to them as I do with many other books I read for the first time. This is another book where I really enjoyed the atmosphere. I just felt the entire setting of, I believe it was called Los Lagos, was really, really great. It felt very Alice in Wonderland-y, very Percy Jackson-esque, and it was just like a fun setting for the story to take place in. I feel like I just don't have a ton to say on Labyrinth Lost because my main issue with it is that I just really wasn't engaged for most of the story. Again, listen to the audiobook could have taken away from my reading experience, but I have a lot of audiobooks that I do listen to that I don't have that experience with. So I just felt like I just wasn't grasping the story all that well, and it wasn't very memorable. I think that's what I'm really trying to get across, is that like it wasn't a long-standing plot in my opinion, and I don't think I'm gonna remember this storyline for years and years and years. I would consider reading the sequel, which just recently came out. I did like it enough to continue with the series and want to know where it goes, especially with the route that the romance takes in this story, because it does feature a slow burn relationship between two girls, and I did really like that aspect. So I would consider reading book 2, but I mean, it took me 2 years from my strong interest in Labyrinth Lost to actually pick it up, so maybe it'll take me another 2 years to read Bruja Born, but we'll see. After the biannual bibliothon, I finally got around to picking up an audiobook that I had been listening to for a very, very long time but paused for the readathon, and that is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I put off reading Strange the Dreamer since it came out. I didn't love Daughter of Smoke and Bone. I read the first book from that trilogy and I didn't really love it, but like every time I would read the synopsis of Strange the Dreamer, I would just get so intimidated and confused, and I was like, there is no way I would ever read this book and like it, just because it is like far beyond what I enjoy in high fantasy and what I feel I am capable of comprehending. But all my friends loved it, and there has just been so much hype for Muse of Nightmares that I figured, why don't I give it a try, because although like I've been really, really intimidated by this story, I do think that it's like a story that I would enjoy, and I was right. Everything I feared about Strange the Dreamer ended up being one of my favorite parts, because the writing in this book is just so lyrical and beautiful. Laini Taylor truly does have a talent for writing, and I think after reading Strange the Dreamer, I am a little bit more motivated to read the rest of the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy, just because I was so drawn by the way that she can string words together. It is just amazing. I really liked the cast of characters. I absolutely fell in love with both Laszlo and Sarai independently, and even though I wasn't really feeling their romance in the beginning, by the end I was just like consumed with love from their love, and it was so great. I also really loved Ruby and Sparrow and Farrell, and especially Minya. Like, I'm so excited to see more from them as well in the sequel Muse of Nightmares, and it was just so good. And I also ended up really loving the storyline. Like I said, every time I read the synopsis, I just like did not know what this book was about, but I think going into it with like no expectations and no understanding of the story worked out really well for me, because by the end I just fell so in love with the magic of this world and of this journey and adventure they're on. Oh, so good. It was just wholly unique and fantastic. I would definitely recommend Strange the Dreamer if you haven't read it yet. I know a lot of you guys have been in a similar position as to me with like the aversion to high fantasy, but Strange the Dreamer there. Would really recommend it. I cannot wait to read Muse of Nightmares. The other book that I ended up DNFing this past month is Our Dark Joette by Victoria Schwab, which is the sequel to The Savage Song, which is a book that I loved. It's been 2 years since I read This Savage Song, and I didn't have anything that I had to read coming up, so I was like, why not complete a series that I really enjoyed? So I got maybe 2 hours and some sort of minutes into it, and I ended up putting it down. From what I read, I don't really have any specific critiques of the story of Our Dark Joette. I didn't love it as much as the first 2 hours or whatever would that be of This Savage Song, but I just wasn't engaged, and it was that serious type of lack of connection where I'm just not retaining anything about the story, and I just felt it wasn't worth it for me to continue. I guess I just wasn't in the mood for it. I think that's just what it comes down to. I do absolutely want to finish the series. In the future, I'm thinking I might pick up just the physical book of it rather than the audiobook and see if that format works better for me, but just wasn't in the mood for it, so I put it down so I could spend my time listening to a different book that I would enjoy much more. And so finally, the novella that I completed in the month of July is Learn About Lost by Cassandra Clare, which is the second novella in the Ghosts of the Shadow Market series. I don't know if it's considered a series. What do you call a group of novellas? I don't know. I can't talk too much about the plot of this one because it is sort of a sequel to the Infernal Devices series, so you will definitely want to read the Infernal Devices before diving into these novellas. But it was really great. I ended up giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I have this thing with Cassandra Clare novellas where I never like them as much as I love the novels. I just feel like her writing does better when she's really able to express herself throughout hundreds of pages instead of a short novella. What I enjoyed the most about Learn About Lost is that it focuses more on characters from the Last Hour series, which is a series that isn't published yet, so it was really cool to get some background information on those set of characters. It's so fascinating to me because when we read about Emma and Julian for the first time in City of Heavenly Fire, because they were going to get their own series, I did not care about them, but I'm just so invested in the lives of the children from the Last Hours now that I'm I just want all the novellas about them. I felt the way the authors combined the independent plot of Brother Zachariah that's being woven through the Ghost of the Shadow Market series with the current plot of Matthew Fairchild before the Last Hours happens was just really well done. I am so excited for the Last Hours now after reading this novella. It was just so good and interesting and engaging, and I just need more stories that I know I'm going to get in the future, but I'm impatient and I want them now. It was a great time. I just finished novella number 3 this morning, so I will be talking about that in my August wrap up, and I'm definitely planning on continuing and staying more up to date with these novellas as they come out, but it was great. I enjoyed it much more than the first one, and I can't wait to see what the rest of them hold. So that really concludes the books that I read in the month of July. I read some amazing books this month. I read some not so amazing books, and I read some books that I didn't finish, but it was overall a very productive reading month, and I'm happy with everything I read. Definitely let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books, what were your thoughts, and let me know what your favorite read of July was. But that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon for a new video. Bye!